What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Tuesday, March 26, 2013, almost getting into the month of April. You wouldn't know it looking at most of the northern hemisphere right now. We'll talk about that later on in the show. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Manny's in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. The corporate media is in full fluff mode. I've been looking at the corporate media all morning. It's all about, it's gay marriage. The Supreme Court's ruling on gay marriage. And Tiger Woods is back in the #1 slot of whatever it is that he does. And we've got a basketball player whose wife is a Maxim model. Blah, 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 blah. Girlfriends murdering boyfriends, husbands murdering wives. It's so tabloid. It's just amazing here. They showed the Maxim cover of this basketball player's wife. I haven't seen that much photoshopping since the dead Osama pictures came on down the pipe. Obviously, the corporate media doesn't want you thinking about certain things out there, like Cyprus. And this Eurozone chief is already out there saying it is going to spread. They are saying already, savings accounts in Spain and Italy are next to be raided to preserve Europe's single currency by propping up this Ponzi scheme central bank. They've actually admitted it. It's going to happen. Now, I don't know about you, but yesterday, remember, I said that a bank that cannot return its depositors' money in full on demand is a bank that has already failed. And a currency that has to be propped up by stealing from the people is a failed currency. They don't want to admit it. They don't want the ride to be over. They don't want to admit that this whole model of private central banking issuing the public currency as a loan at interest is a failed experiment. It's an epic fail. They don't want to admit it because the wealth still goes to them, and they're going to keep this thing going just as long as they can. But they're now talking about other countries in Europe are next. They got away with it in Cyprus. They were able to override the will of the parliament. They were able to override the will of the people. And huzzah, huzzah, we've saved Cyprus. Maybe, maybe not. The Bank of Cyprus chairman just resigned. He tendered his resignation. It's going before the board later in the day. They'll probably accept it. It looks like the looting of savers' accounts didn't really fix Cyprus. And the private central rats are starting to leave the private central sinking ship. Not too surprisingly, Fitch has downgraded the banks of Cyprus. In the case of Laiki and the Bank of Cyprus, which are in the bad column, they're down to D level, means they are in default, which may start triggering some of those credit default swaps Wall Street sold against Europe's debt here. Now, Cyprus finance minister has ordered all of the banks in Cyprus to remain closed until Thursday. They were supposed to open today, but they're going to be closed until Thursday. And when they reopen, there will be weekly cash curbs. The people of Cyprus will only be allowed to take out so much every week, just enough to live on. That's how bad it has gotten over there. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. So, Cyprus banks are now scheduled to reopen for business on Thursday. Maybe. Supposed to open last week, then it was going to be Monday, then it was Tuesday, now it's Thursday. When they finally do reopen, if they do, Cyprus is going to impose severe cash transaction curbs. This is being reported by the BBC. There are going to be weekly limits on cash withdrawals. You can only take out of your account enough to buy your bowl of gruel and a crust of bread to stay alive on. These capital controls also include export limits on euros. Wire transfers are going to be severely curtailed, and a ban on cashing checks. That's how serious it is. Now, common sense is going to tell you, if you don't have control over your money, it's not your money anymore. So this goes way beyond the shave-off, the levy. They've just taken away, the people of Cyprus have taken away part, they've taken away part of their money, and now they're saying they can't get at the rest of it. For all intents and purposes, they've confiscated it all. And the people of Cyprus are going to go back to the bank, back to the ATM machine on their bended knees and say, please, I need money to eat this week. And the bank will say, all right, here's a few coins. For all practical purposes, the bank customers in Cyprus have lost all their money. And they're living on handouts from the bankers. All of this done without the permission of the parliament, certainly without the permission of the people. It's ruled by the bankers, ruled by the money junkies. It's fascism. Europe is falling into fascism. Now, of course, something that few people seem to be thinking about is, what about investors in Cyprus? Not just in the Cyprus banks, but all of Cyprus. Investors in their tourism, investors in their fishing, investors in whatever it is that Cyprus does in the world commerce, besides provide a no longer in existence tax-friendly bank environment. Foreign investors are going to start yanking their money out of there just as fast as they can. Cyprus is falling, and they can't stop it. Investors are now starting to worry about Slovenia. And as I said in the first segment of the show, the European Union finance ministers are already saying it's going to be Spain and Italy next. This is robbery of the people to prop up a failed banking system. It's a stick-up, is what it is. And they're still moving forward with that rationalization that customers of a bank, people who have savings account and checkings account, are technically now considered investors in the bank, and therefore that's the rationale for them sharing the losses. Well, they certainly didn't share in the profits when the bank was working. They got that little fixed interest rate on their savings, and that was about it. The bondholders were supposed to take the risk because they got the huge payout. And the bondholders are taking their huge payout, and they're not suffering any losses. The losses are being dropped on the people. That is the hallmark of a fascist economic dictatorship. And of course, the fact that the European Union Central Bank and the IMF were able to basically come in and do this, even though the Cyprus Parliament voted it down, shows that Cyprus' national sovereignty is gone. There's a civil government there to make the people feel like they still have a nation. They don't. They just got foreclosed on. Not through any fault of their own. These people of Cyprus, soon to be Spain, soon to be Italy, soon to be all across the Eurozone, soon to be here, we are all the victims of the money junkies. Remember when I said that there is no science of banking? It's an arbitrary set of rules we're taught to believe in that serves the clergy, the bankers. And this is their latest rule. When the Ponzi scheme starts to collapse, you, the people, have to give us your wealth to prop it up a little bit longer. And you know something? Isn't going to work. It doesn't matter how much they loot the people, until they are willing to look at the design flaw in private central banking itself. None of these actions they're doing, stealing from the people, quantitative easing, TARP, none of it is going to work. None of it is going to change the ultimate outcome. These are at best delaying tactics until the whole system comes crashing down and the world stands up and realizes that private central banks issuing the public currency as a loan at interest cannot work indefinitely. It must crash eventually, after the people who set up this little Ponzi scheme have gone to their graves happy with their wealth and luxury and privilege. That's the scam. Now, Russia's trying to get their money out of Cyprus. They're going through agents and affiliates in other countries to escape the specific blockades that were put between Cyprus and Russia. We're now finding out that Cyprus's bailout isn't going to hit Russia's oligarchs. Remember when the Soviet Union fell and the Russian republics were formed, one of the first things Putin did was kick the oligarchs out, the money junkies. Oligarch is Russian for money junkie. And a lot of them moved back to Israel, and a lot of them have their money in the Cyprus banks, and apparently they're not going to get hit. It's Russian companies and the Russian government accounts that are getting shaved off. Remember what we said yesterday? It came out, the president of Cyprus had warned all of his good buddies to get their money out of Cyprus days before the freezes were put on the bank accounts. The money junkies always take care of each other at the expense of everybody else. Russia's banking system. Remember I told you Russia's banking system is now the target of the money junkies because Russia took control of their central bank, and that can't be allowed to happen. It's the reason Libya was invaded. It's the reason they're getting ready to go to war with Russia and China. They won't go along with private central banking in charge of the nation's economy. And apparently Russian banks have $40 billion at risk in Cyprus. And I'm sure the European banking cartels would love nothing better than to find a way to destroy Russia's state-controlled central bank so they can go in there and say, see, you need a private central bank. Because that's the way you avoid wars and all this other bad stuff that's happening. Meanwhile, over at Ex-Republic TV, there's an article we linked to basically saying this Cyprus deal is pushing the entire European Union closer to a repeat of the French and worse Bolshevik revolutions. It's obvious this system does not work for the people and the nation. And people are getting angry. We're hearing already that a very slow bank run is starting to take shape all across Europe, especially in Italy and Spain. And there are lessons to come out of this that we all need to keep in mind. Lesson number one is you do not trust the politicians. Because the current president of Cyprus made it a campaign promise during the last election that bank deposits would be safe. Bank deposits would be the last thing to be threatened by the economic problems. And remember, it was only about a month ago that the Cyprus banks passed one of these stress tests that are always being run to reassure us the banking system is sound, we don't need to worry, we don't need to take our money out of the bank accounts. The people of Cyprus just realized that that's all these stress tests are. A sales pitch to keep your money in the bank. I was talking to a lady at one of the retail places we do business with about what was going on, and saying, common sense, you should take your extra money out of the bank and bring it home. She says, won't it be a danger there? Won't people break in and rob me? Well, not if you don't announce it, to everybody in the neighborhood. Yes, I just went to the bank and brought home $15,000 to stick in my cookie jar. You don't go out and do that. Right now, your money is at greater risk of being stolen in the bank than out of it. It's a major paradigm shift. We've all been brainwashed to view banks as the bastion of safety and security. Not anymore. Not anymore. And of course, the other thing that came out of this conversation with my friend over at this retail establishment, she's firmly in the grip of the, oh, this can't happen here mentality. And I'm sure the people of Spain and Italy were saying that to themselves only a few days ago. And now they're being told it's probably going to happen there as well. We all need to wake up and see what's going on. We all need to understand the government and the banks are not concerned with us. They don't care about you. They don't care about the community. They don't care about the nation. They're money junkies. They're addicts. And they're going to go on grabbing everything that they can with wild, reckless abandon until the system comes apart. And it is up to you to fully understand the situation so that you can make good choices on how best to protect yourself and your family and your assets from the money junkies. Because they're coming for you. They're coming for every single one of you. Right now. Yes, it can happen here. Bernanke still won't come out and say, no, it's not going to happen here. He's using phrases like, it's unlikely, only if he's trying to trivialize it, but he won't actually step across the line into saying, no, it's not going to happen here. Forewarned is forearmed. Got to get out of that denial. Yeah, it can happen here, and it's probably on the way right now. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as you know, we've been talking a lot about these credit default swaps. that Wall Street sold against Europe's debt. And they sold them at a pretty low price. I mean, they made a lot of money. And they wrote themselves huge bonuses and bought themselves $100,000 wristwatches and had a real good time of that because they were absolutely sure these credit default swaps would never come due, which of course is exactly what AIG was thinking when they were selling credit default swaps against the mortgage-backed securities and not keeping a cash reserve to make payments on that. But credit default swaps are still being sold. Derivatives are still completely unregulated. But what is the cost of these credit default swaps is starting to go up. It's called the risk premiums. And they're starting to go up, which means the financial system is aware that this debt contagion in Cyprus is spreading to Spain and Italy. And the public is becoming aware that bank deposits are not safe. We're already hearing, again, slow bank runs already starting all across Europe. Nobody's, they're not rioting in the streets. They're not breaking through the windows of the banks, other than in Cyprus. But they're going in and they're just going to get more of their money under their own control in their home. Put it into silver and gold. And as I said before, it's already being reported in several sources that the European Union finance chief is saying other European Union taxpayers can be targeted to prop up the single currency, to prop up the Ponzi scheme. They're announcing this is what's going to happen. I think Ex-Republic TV said it best. No bank account anywhere in the Eurozone is safe. And because of those derivatives, those credit default swaps, the contagion does have to come to the United States of America. Ben Bernanke's platitudes and reassurances and dismissals notwithstanding. That is the downside of globalism. And I've talked about this for years and years, that globalism, whether it's political or economic, is a disaster. Because national borders, economic borders, serve the same safety function as fireproof doors in a building or watertight bulkheads in a ship. They contain disaster. And the money junkies and their desire to have a giant single global Ponzi scheme bank knock down all those fireproof doors and watertight bulkheads. And Cyprus is on fire and they can't stop it. Over at globalresearch.ca, they're saying this could be the beginning of the end of the Eurozone. Yeah, it is. When the Eurozone is propping up their private central bank by literally stealing from bank customers, that's the beginning of the end. How do you come back from that? How do you restore the public's trust in the banks after something like that? How do you restore their respect and obedience to a civil government when the civil government couldn't intervene to stop the bankers from looting the accounts? They've crossed over a line. There is no going back. It's way past the point where they could turn it around and get this back to stability, because the money junkies won't surrender a single penny of that manufactured debt with which they hope to enslave the people of the world. It is the essence of the banking industry to keep us all, whether we be nations or individuals, slaves to debt. Now, world markets were down on concern over the Cyprus bailout. Australian shares ended down 0.8%. But of course, here in the United States of America, the stock market is soaring. And we're looking at the Dow, and it took off at the opening bell like a skyrocket. And looking at the volume numbers, it's the plunge protection team, it's the high-frequency traders. They have to keep that stock market up, or the American banks become instantly insolvent. This whole thing is so fragile. They're trying to hold it together with duct tape and baling wire here. The Spanish government is getting ready to impose heavy losses on investors at their nationalized banks. And they're hiring external advisors because they want to duck the blame for this whole thing. Belgium has just severely increased taxes on their bank deposits and bank interest. The cash grab is on. And when you are putting these kinds of taxes on bank deposits, you've disincentivized the reason for having a savings account. Because if you've got money in a savings account and between inflation and higher taxes, you're losing real purchasing power every single day that money stays in there, people are going to say, I'm going to pull it out, put it into silver and gold. Hide it in the cookie jar. All right, we got, we're coming up on a break. We got a caller on the line I'm going to get to when we come back from this commercial break here. Apparently, Italians are going heavily into gold right now. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take some phone calls. Paul in New York. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Paul. To Paul.
You're Paul.
I'm
Mike.
How much money are we talking about in these deposits in Cyprus?
I don't have a total
amount.
I don't have a total amount of what the current holdings of the bank is. I don't even know if that's publicly available. But it's enough. Part of the problem, of course, is Cyprus was considered a tax haven, and that's why you had the government of Lebanon had a lot of their bank accounts there. Government of Russia had a lot of their bank accounts there. All the exiled Russian money junkies had their money there. It should have been one of the world's most powerful banks, and it was brought down by this Ponzi reality. When the pyramid crashes, you know, it's all going to fall apart. It may have been actually that surplus of wealth in the banks that was part of the problem, because unless the banks can loan it back out again, having huge amounts of deposits in the bank is actually a cash drain because they're paying interest on it. And the only way the banks can keep going is if they can find somebody who's willing to borrow that money and pay a higher interest on that loaned out money, so the banks can pay a lower level of interest to the savings depositors. And so that may have actually been a little bit of their downfall as the economy tightened up and people don't have jobs. But ultimately, it all goes back to the fact that private central banking issuing the public currency as a loan at interest is a pyramid scam. And every pyramid in history has to come crashing down, without exception.
Yeah, because I wanted to say, like, this happened in the United States. Like, some years ago, I had some money, and I was getting good interest where I could live, you know, and then the interest rates went from, like, say, 5-6%, and then they just knocked them down to next to zero. So I'm saying, God knows how many trillions of dollars were in deposits, and then how many trillions of dollars were stolen from the depositors by, say, I was getting like $12,000 a year. You know what I'm saying? Because, say, basically I had like 200, right? I was getting, you know, so that disappeared. So how much money did they make off us? I mean, that doesn't compare anything to what this place Cyprus is going to. And
you'd be amazed.
I never hear anybody talk about it or anything like that.
You would be amazed.
I mean, they must have of trillions over these years.
My turn. You would be amazed how much banks make off your savings deposit, because you put $1 into the bank and you're getting, let's say, 3% on that $1. Because of fractional reserve banking, the bank can turn around and from your $1, they can loan out 8, then it was 10, now it's almost unlimited. They can loan out $30 at 5 to 7% interest. And so when you count up that interest they're making on all these fractional reserve dollars they've created out of thin air from your savings account, they're making tons and tons of money off of your savings deposit, and you're getting a few pennies for it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, because, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, you know, it's really changed my life.
That's the problem right there. When you say it's unbelievable, that's what blinds your eyes to what's going on. It is believable. It's the way they've always done it. And you need to start understanding, yeah, this is the reality behind all the TV commercials about safe and secure, fiduciary, unlimited trust bank. It's just another religion. And the clergy of the religion of banking are just as corrupt and abusive of their congregation as the clergy over there at the Catholic Church. They've got you enslaved by your beliefs that this is a good thing. And those beliefs blind you to the reality of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, Lincoln got into trouble maybe because he was printing greenbacks.
That's exactly right.
And the banksters must have not liked that. And then John F. Kennedy, he made this one speech. They say that was his death speech, where he spoke about these secret societies and about the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
You know, and there's a lot of people assassinated. And right early in the Constitution, when we started, they were successful, some of these presidents. But then there were attempted assassinations and things like that. And then there's another thing. This is kind of off the topic. Is Puerto Rico a state?
Okay, you're going to have to repeat that because the phone connection dropped briefly. Is what a state?
Puerto Rico.
No, it's not. It's a territory.
It's a territory.
It's a U.S. territory.
U.S. territory.
Like Guam.
And then the people of Puerto Rico, are they U.S. citizens?
I believe they're considered U.S. citizens in a U.S. territory, and they can actually vote.
Well, why do you say they're considered?
Well, they're all right. They're U.S. citizens. They're U.S. citizens.
No, somebody's calling me. That's why I interrupted.
Oh, okay. Listen, I got to let you go, and we've got other callers waiting on the line. But I do want to hammer home that point that all of this machination, economic, it is a religion. There is no science of banking. There's no laws of physics that govern banking. It is an arbitrary set of rules and beliefs that you are brainwashed into believing is the way the real world is supposed to be. And it isn't. It's just an arbitrary set of rules that favor the bankers. We fought a revolution to be free of this kind of banking. And if you go back and you look at All Wars Are Banker Wars, and I did reprise it to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, and it's a retelling of American history, linking all of the major events, the wars, the assassinations, all of it, to the motivations of the private central bankers' intent, even if it costs 100 million lives, intent on keeping us all slaved to these private banks issuing the public currencies alone at interest. There are alternative ways to run a national economy. They're never going to let it happen. If they have to invade Libya and kill Gaddafi, they'll do it. If they have to start a world war and send 100 million people to their deaths, they'll do it. Right now, they're apparently getting ready to send 1 billion human beings to horrible deaths as long as it guarantees the surviving 6 billion will remain slaves to private central banks issuing the public currency as a loan at interest. Going to switch over to Tony in Connecticut. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Just wanted to bring to your attention something that happened today. I went to my mailbox, and this made me very happy. Usually I get a ton of bills. But I got something from the conservative, it says the American Conservative Union. And in the window of the letter, it said, in bold, bright, highlighted print, it said, "Don't drop Fox News." And it was a survey, you know, and they were asking all kinds of questions. What's your favorite show? And should we bring Glenn Beck back? And all this kind of nonsense. Mm-hmm. I haven't had a TV for 2 years, Mike. And then they asked for a contribution as well.
Of course.
But it made me think that, you know, the corporate mainstream media is getting really desperate to, you know, to be sending out these surveys and trying to find out why they're losing so much viewership. I just wrote back, it said on the header, it said, "Dear fellow conservative," and I crossed out where it said fellow, and I said, Fox News is not a conservative news channel. It says it is neoconservative, and neoconservative equals liberalism. But it was just surprising to me that they're getting so desperate that now they're trying to find out, and this was obviously a mass mailing, to find out why they're losing viewership, and it just made me happy to think that they are, because they're basically a dinosaur.
They are thrashing around. Listen, do me a favor. If you're going to fill that out and send it in, on the spot where it says your favorite show, say What Really Happened on Republic Broadcasting for me.
I definitely will, Michael. In fact, I put stamps on the envelope. I will put that right below P.S. whatreallyhappened.com, and I will enjoy it as I drop it into the bankrupt U.S. Postal Service.
That's true. It may not even get there. You may not even get there. Anything else, Tony?
No. Just wanted to mention a great show once again, Michael. I listen to you all the time. I follow your website, and you're doing humanity a great service. Keep up the good work.
I will, just as long as I can. Thank you for the kind words. Looking at the corporate media, apparently a script from the TV show Breaking Bad has been stolen from the car of one of the actors. They really are conditizing us, aren't they? Who cares if a script is stolen? It's a TV show. It's not reality. They're trying to make a big deal about this because they don't want to talk about Cyprus, and they don't want to talk about Syria, and they don't want to talk about this rush for another war to serve the money junkies here. Back to the phones. Jim in Alabama. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Good. I just wanted to mention one thing that I think that a lot of people don't realize about their money in the bank. Now, if what I've heard is true, and I believe that it is, and I believe I got this information from the series on YouTube or the internet about banking, is that once you put your money in the bank, once you deposit your money in the bank, that money is no longer yours. That money becomes the property of the bank. You get a receipt for that deposit, and that receipt is a promise to repay you your money on demand. Well, obviously, I guess banks can break their promises.
That's exactly right, and that's the point that we have to hammer home. The banks are already starting to break that promise in Cyprus. Next it's going to be Spain and Italy, where they're going to say, we can't give you back your money. There's nothing you can do about it. We just needed it more than you did in order to balance our most holy ledger and make sure that there's black ink on the bottom.
Right. Well, I took your advice and advice of a lot of others a few months ago, and I completely pulled out of the banking system. This is nothing but a Ponzi scheme, and they stole too much money from me.
Well, that's what they're in business to do. That this whole private central banking scheme is designed to loot the nation and its people of their real wealth. That's what it does. That's why they're willing to start world wars to keep this scam going. And again, go back and read All Wars Are Bankers' Wars and share it with your friends. I know it's gone all over the planet already. It's gone viral. It's been picked up. And I get a lot of emails from people saying, I didn't really understand the thread through American history that made sense up until this moment. Okay?
Well, all right, Mike. Thanks a lot. Well, I've been a long-time listener, and keep up the great work, my friend.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go here. I'm just looking at this article right now. This is from CyprusMail.com, where Britain is cutting off pension payments into the Cyprus banks out of concern that the pensioners are not going to get the money. I don't know how it is they're planning on getting it to them directly without interdiction, but that's apparently their new step. This thing is just spreading. They can't control it here. Yesterday we were talking about Texas passing a law to place Texas gold bullion, the state's gold bullion, out of reach of the Federal Reserve, and we're getting more and more details about that from Daily Bail. Texas is basically demanding their physical gold bullion back from the Federal Reserve, just like Germany tried to do and a lot of other countries are trying to do. And so the gold run is beginning. The gold run on the banks is definitely beginning. Now, we were talking the other day about the BRICS nations and how Putin was out there saying it was time for BRICS to expand from just being a cooperative arrangement between the member nations and actually start working towards world politics. And now apparently they're proposing they're going to have a common currency that will be a rival to the euro and the U.S. dollar. And they're bringing it up at a time when the euro and the U.S. dollar are clearly in serious trouble. The world has lost confidence in these two currencies. And that's another reason the money junkies are rushing toward war. The money junkies without fail, and this has been a hallmark of American history and world history. The money junkies without fail will destroy any nation with an honest banking system that serves the public in order to keep their little Ponzi scheme the global standard for everybody. Back to the phones, Ted in Canada. Aloha, Ted. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, that didn't take long to get in. First-time caller. I got a question about, I know only about like 2% of all the currency is actually the paper and the coins.
Yeah, the rest is in computers.
Yeah, and I know banks hardly keep any of it on deposit. So when a bank, what does it cost for a bank to order up? When they place an order to the mint or whoever it is, they'd have to pay for a truck to deliver the actual cash.
Yeah, that's what armored cars are for.
Do they have other charges? Like if they want to order up X amount of actual currency, paper currency, do they have some other charge associated with it?
Well, yes, certainly they do, because a bank just doesn't get that cash from the Federal Reserve for free. The Federal Reserve loans that cash to the bank at interest. The bank then turns around and uses that cash. They're paying interest on it to the Federal Reserve, and they pay for that interest by charging you interest or bank fees on everything that you do. It's just this constant flow of accumulating interest up to the privately owned Federal Reserve.
Yeah, I know that too, but I mean, say if they normally have $1 million in cash, and then they phone up and say, "Oh, look, next week we're going to need $2 million in cash." Mm-hmm. Do they have to pay some extra charge? I mean, besides the interest for how it gets created as a loan at interest and all that.
No.
Do they have some.
The Federal Reserve pays a cost of manufacturing to the United States Mint. The United States Mint works for the Federal Reserve to create the physical currency. And the Federal Reserve pays just for the ink, paper, and printing. That's all they pay for. The Federal Reserve will then take that money and loan it at full face value to the banks, charging interest, and the banks will then turn around and loan it to you at full face value plus interest to keep this whole pyramid going.
Yeah, so it goes that way with the paper too. All right, well, let's keep up the good work, Mike. That's all I had to ask.
All right, you've got it there. So anyway, you got it. So here we're talking about the BRICS nation. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are setting up their own state bank, and they're proposing a common currency, which will be presented as, will certainly be perceived as, a direct threat to the dollar. Gee, I wonder who we're going to war against next. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And just saw this thing coming across the corporate media. They are proposing a fat tax for airline passengers, where the cost of your airline ticket is going to be based on your weight. Because the heavier you are, the more fuel it takes to carry you, and the more greenhouse gases are going into the atmosphere, you horrible person. Now, I understand the advantages of losing weight. I'm in the middle of a diet myself. I've lost about 40 pounds. I got another 40 pounds to go here. But this is discrimination based on your body. And yes, you can lose weight, but what about people who are born 6.5 feet tall and have a heavy bone density? They're being penalized for something completely beyond their control. They're going to pay more for their airline tickets than people who were born who are only 5 foot tall and have very thin, fragile bones. That's how desperate they are to grab more money. It doesn't even really make rational sense any longer. It's just any excuse to take more money is what they're going to do. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha, Andrea. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, aloha. I'm really upset about Cyprus, but I know the people of Cyprus are very unhappy, considering they probably
That's putting it mildly.
Pandemonium there, but if you're going to nip something in the bud, man, that seems like the place to do it and lose control. I'm really, congratulate Iceland for standing up and doing something, the people standing up and throwing out the government and all. And these bankers, whoever they are, whatever their name is, which is huge because it's nice to know who you hate. It seems like it's always the they people, whoever they are, and it'd be nice to be able to put a finger on them, and so you could throw darts at the picture at least. It's just a shame that one of the countries, like, I know I'm kind of looking for a superhero like Russia to step in, or somebody that really cares, because we're all kind of related to one another.
No. Don't look for a superhero. The Lone Ranger is not coming. Batman is a comic book. If you want change in the world, you are going to have to make it happen in concert with 7 billion other human beings on planet Earth. Nobody is coming to save you. You're going to have to make it happen yourself. If you want to live in a world driven by debt slavery, then just sit on your butt and do nothing. If you want a better world to leave to future generations, you are going to have to make it happen.
Well, when making it happen, you can't sit on the fence and say, well, I don't like for there to be, violence. You've got to get off the fence and do something. And something means there might be some pushing and shoving, which might lead to some, doubling up your fist, and it just leads to one.
Well, we'd like to avoid that. I think the best thing we can do is to. Okay,
I don't know that that's possible.
Andrea, we got to take a break for station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And responding to Andrea, because I didn't have time before the station break, I know there are a lot of angry people out there. I know there's a lot of scared people out there. The reason I am telling people not to resort to violence is because that's what the government wants. Because then they can say, oh, they're just criminals, they're rioters, they're terror suspects, whatever, and they can start using all that hollow point ammunition they've been buying. The best thing that you can do to fight against this global fascist dictatorship that they're rushing to try and enslave you to is to take what you know, what you learn on this show, and share it with your friends and family. There's a lot of denial out there. The sheer scale of the banker fraud is so huge, people just don't even want to deal with it. And it's like this lady I was talking to at the store the other day where she, oh, it can't happen here. My money's safe in the bank. It wouldn't be safe at home. So if she hears from just me, one person, that Cyprus has gone down, savings accounts are being looted, Spain and Italy are next, and it's probably going to come here. She can go on with her denial. But if she hears it from 2 or 3 of her friends, that's going to break through. And that's why it is so important for you to speak out with everybody you know about what's going on. And don't say, you got to believe me, trust me, whatever. Just say, go out on the internet and do a web search and understand the reason the TV news is not even mentioning this is the fear by the bankers that you will empty your savings accounts so that they can't be looted and confiscated. The TV news is not going to tell you what you need to know to make good choices. You must tell each other what you need to know. And just end your presentation by saying, don't take my word for it. Go out and do your own homework. Get on the net, web search Cyprus, levies, savings accounts. There's so much out there now, they can't help but stumble across the truth. And when you have the courage to speak out about what's going on, you're going to give courage to others around you to speak out. You're in a room of people and you start talking about how the banking system is falling apart and they're looting their savings customers to try and save themselves. You'll probably have a bunch of voices pipe up and say, I was thinking the same thing. I thought I was the only person. I thought I was nuts for thinking this is what was going on. And you find out everybody around you already knew to some extent something horrible is going on. And they didn't want to say anything because they thought they were the only one and they were afraid of ridicule and abuse from the general public. And the only ones you have to fear being ridiculed by are the various informants that are running around our society, working for the FBI or for the bankers. We can do this without resorting to violence. Violence would be the biggest mistake any of us could make. Think Gandhi. and how he got rid of the British government and the Bank of England from India. All right, let's see. Steve in Florida, I'm going to start with you. Probably have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I have 3 things. I might be able to get to 2 of them, but the last caller is that's one of my pet peeves is that this blissful ignorance and then waiting for a Messiah or whatever to deliver us from all of this mess, like sitting around and just merely complaining about things, but doing nothing, not realizing that it's going to take us all.
That's exactly right.
Do this.
Steve, got to cut you off at the commercial break, but you're absolutely right. When 300 million Americans stand up and say we will not be the wallet of last resort for the failure of Wall Street, it's all going to come crashing down. Non-violently, we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the corporate media is back on gay marriage, and the Supreme Court will have a decision by summertime. Again, it's all fluff and distraction. And I understand for people who are gay, this is very important. But it's nowhere near as important to all Americans as the possibility that what happened in Cyprus is going to happen here. Bernanke will not rule it out. So back to Steve in Florida. You had a couple more things you wanted to share with us.
Yeah, we were talking about somebody expecting, too many people expecting other people to solve. They know something is gone awry, and they're expecting other people to sort of fix it for them, and we just need, everybody to be number one, informed. And I'll tell you, look what happened to Occupy. They just basically, with violence, scared everybody off and sent them home. But
now,
didn't change their mind.
That's right. Remember, the people that appeared to be carrying out violence on the side of the Occupy movement were all exposed as hired agent provocateurs. But you're absolutely right. And that was done to justify the police coming in and using violence against the Occupy movement. And we've seen the U.S. government arm itself for a war against the 50 states, and that's why the last thing we want to do is create a violent incident that they can use to declare national emergency and martial law and the rest of it. They are so desperate, they may start one themselves. They may get a whole bunch of their informants or some bunch of patsies to go on out and start something. But I want to make it clear here.
They're planning on it.
Yes.
But I will tell you, what you say is so valid because when I first saw that the Occupy movement and how strong it was, I'll tell you when I first saw that, literally tears are rolling down my face to know that there's somebody else who sees this and was actually doing something about their country.
Well, again, all the Occupy movement was about the message, not from the agent provocateurs, the ones who were standing out there with signs saying, bring back communism and all the rest. They were the plants to give the media an easy handle to demonize the Occupy movement. But all the Occupy movement said was, we the people are not financially responsible for the failure of this Ponzi scheme central bank. And foreign investors are already hearing that message. Foreign investment in the U.S. is down like 30% already. So they're getting the message. Okay?
Right. But, I'm wondering exactly, not exactly, but I think there has to be a clearer message, to people that want to speak up. And, you're right, violence, we tried it once with the Occupy thing. Look what happened. It's not like they were violent, but they were rebuffed as being, they weren't focused, and they had no list of demands and all that kind of thing.
Well,
blah, blah, blah.
again, the reason for that, there was no specific list of demands because they didn't want the point-by-point refutation in the media. The message was simple: we are not going to be the wallet of last resort, and that was the only argument. Now, as far as being rebuffed, hang on. As far as being rebuffed and suppressed, what really happened is the people who went out there and joined the Occupy movement did so in the faith that the United States of America still represents the will of the people. And they went out and peacefully expressed the will of the people. Now they have learned the government and the money junkies aren't listening. And you remember what John F. Kennedy said: those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. Now, I'm setting it as my goal to head off violence because the wrong people are going to get hurt on that. There is a way to bring this system down. Taking your money out of the bank accounts is one of the first steps. Tearing up your credit cards is another one. De-link from this predatory system as much as you can. They can't throw you in jail for cutting up your credit cards. They can't throw you in jail for taking your money out of the bank. Those are still legal, at least at this moment. And those are things that you can do that are going to impact the system. That's why they're delaying the reopening of the banks in Cyprus. That's why they're talking about the banks are going to keep all the money and only let you have enough to live on. That's how desperate they are over there. Okay, Steve?
Basically, you're saying to take your money out of the banks and stop with the credit cards.
Yeah, you should definitely stop with the credit cards if you're able to. I know a lot of people are dependent on them right now because they've lost their jobs and whatnot. But the common sense advice in light of what just happened in Cyprus and what's about to happen in Spain and Italy and the rest of the Eurozone is you should have no more money in the bank than you need to pay your obligations. You've got to have the money in the bank to cover the checks that you just wrote. But if you have anything over and above that, bring it home, put it in the cookie jar, put it into silver and gold.
And I'm wondering if you could, sort of roughly walk us through that, because it's something that I don't normally do is buy silver. And how do you know it's silver and, that kind of thing. And then the last thing, the whole reason why I called you, Mike, and I'm sorry, is that I've been reading about the link between what Israel and Turkey are holding hands.
They're not. Apparently,
that doesn't even make any sense to me.
Well, the reason, I'll tell you what, let me go back to the issue about silver and gold. First of all, you want to go to a reputable dealer like Republic Trading Group or somebody local, or you can go out on eBay and purchase what's called junk silver, which is the pre-1965, see, I remembered the correct year, U.S. coinage, which had actual silver in it. And those are going to be really good for bartering and commerce after the collapse of the Federal Reserve. Yes, there's some fakery out there. Germany found gold bars with the hallmarks of Fort Knox on them with tungsten cores, so you do need to be careful. There have been fake silver bars out there. Again, you need to go to a dealer that you really trust, that you have a relationship with, and of course, if they cheat you, you go and you have Uncle Nunzio go take care of that little situation here. Now, as far as Israel and Turkey is concerned, the situation here is that Turkey is feeling very much the pressure of Israel and the U.S. using them as the staging ground for the invasion of Syria. And in order that the government of Turkey would have a little more political cover for what they're doing, because the Turkish people don't like any of this, they wanted to get that apology and normalize relations, and it was all going to be buddy-buddy and holding hands and trading wet, sloppy kisses. It looks like that hasn't really worked out, because Turkey just announced today that despite Israel's apology, they are still going to be taking the Israeli officers who committed those murders on the aid flotilla to the international court. And so this apology was a political move, and I guess Turkey understands that's all it really was. We here in the United States of America are still waiting for an apology for the American citizen who was murdered by the IDF in that attack. It was a political ploy, and it looks like it's really not getting much traction. I'm going to switch over to Tim in New Mexico. Aloha, Tim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael, I wanted to take kind of just a little bit of minor umbrage with when we were talking earlier about the bank deposits and the banks promise to pay on demand. I don't think that's appropriate. I think the correct word is they had a contract to pay on demand. For consideration of using your money and loaning it out, they agreed to these terms. So you have consideration and agreement. And according to the bankers, when it came bonus time, contracts are sacrosanct. We, who were not parties to the contracts, actually had to uphold the sanctity of their contracts when we bailed the banks out in 2008. So I think we need to start using their terms. They are in breach of contract.
Okay, well, let me cut you off here because I don't want to muddy up this discussion by getting into what the exact interpretation of the relationship between the customer and the bank is. Let's keep it simple and easy to understand. You deposit your money in a savings account in exchange for a certain amount of interest and the understanding that your money will be there safe when you need to take it out. The banks have now violated that understanding. And we don't need to get into the fine points and details about exactly what that contractual relationship is. The banks have broken faith with the customers. That's all you need to know. Okay?
Okay. I also want to cover one thing on the $100,000 thing. I think there was an issue there. The magic figure of $100,000 is because of the insurance policies, and they didn't want to trip the insurance policies and have to deal with a bailout of the banking insurance.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Under European Union rules, deposits under 100,000 euro are insured, and it doesn't really make any sense to loot those because then the government has to turn around and make good on the insurance and replace the money. And that's why they hit that 100,000 euro cutoff. I think another part of the mechanism was they were going to say to the ordinary people, look, we're hitting the rich. They've got it. You shouldn't be upset that we're hitting the rich. But what they're really hitting is the middle class because the super rich, the bondholders of the banks, didn't get hit. This was the middle class depositors who had some 100,000 euros in the bank. They're the ones who got nailed by this thing. We got to take a break. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We were talking a little while ago about the so-called fat tax for air travelers, where the more you weigh, the more you're going to pay. They're sort of like ticketing you the way they charge for air freight. It's also the way they treat you in the airports and on the airplane. You know, you're just freight. Get in that seat. Sit down. Here's your cracker. Shut up. And I'm old enough to remember when air travel was a very, very pleasant experience. Didn't get your crotch groped. Didn't get your personal stuff pawed through. Didn't get your laptop dropped and smashed by the Tourism Suppression Agency. Get on the airplane, there'd be a little package of, like slippers. If it was a long flight, there'd be a blindfold, all kinds of smoked almonds for free and all this other stuff. And they treated you like they really wanted you on the airplane. Not anymore. Speaking of airplanes, the corporate media has, I guess, beat the gay marriage issue to death, and now they're onto this thing about, according to the FAA, there are going to be 7,500 drones in the skies over America by blah, 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 whatever time that they're going to have here. You know, it occurs to me, the FCC is going to have to issue radio channels for these drones so they don't conflict with each other. If you ever go out and you watch people flying radio-controlled model airplanes, and you'll see this little colored ribbon on the antenna of the controller. That's to tell everybody else around there what radio channel they're on so they're not interfering with each other. And this means all the frequencies controlling these drones will be known. It means you can jam them if you're doing something you don't want a drone watching, like having fun with your significant other on the upstairs porch of your home. Now, back to the phones. Dan in Carolina. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I wanted to share with you a little-known quote from Gandhi.
Mm-hmm.
He said that, if I can get this right, if a government rules by reason, it will be constrained by reason. If a government rules by law, it may be constrained by law if the people are diligent. If a government rules by force, it may only be constrained by force. Now, keeping in mind, his whole thing was nonviolence. But Gandhi did not have any aversion to the use of force to constrain a government. So the question becomes, what are our options to compel our government? What nonviolent options are we left with? And you've mentioned, for example, cutting up your credit cards. Well, what else have we got in our bag of tricks? How can
again,
we compel?
going back to Gandhi, peaceful, nonviolent, non-cooperation. Don't do what they're telling you to do. Just stay away from the system. Don't get involved. And it did work. It brought down British rule and the Bank of England in India. And they broke free. And the same thing is going to happen here. Again, just looking at what's going on in Europe and looking how it is inevitably linked to Wall Street by those derivatives, all we have to do is stay calm, not get tricked into doing something the government can use as an excuse to completely trash what's left of the Bill of Rights. And it's all going to come crashing down by itself, the way the Soviet Union did.
Well, do you really think, and I'm not being critical here, I'm trying to understand, do you really think the government would make a decision at any point to do what is in the best interests of the people rather than their own best interests unless we can compel them to make that choice?
The answer is going to be no. At this point, the federal government has very clearly demonstrated it is going to do what they are paid to do by Wall Street, by Israel, by Monsanto, by the rest of it. I don't think there is any amount of force that could be brought to bear on the government that would change their opinion of themselves. They don't see themselves as bad guys. They don't see themselves as villains. And again, we have seen this government arming itself for a war against the 50 states. And I just think the most prudent course of action is we don't give them an excuse to launch that war. And I'm telling my listeners and my readers, do not initiate violence against the government. That's the opening they're looking for. On the other hand, be prepared to defend yourselves in your homes when the government initiates violence against you. That's the most common sense advice I can give here right now. Just wait. It's coming down. It's falling apart right now before our very eyes. We don't need to do a thing. If there is a if there is a revolution in this country, it doesn't need to march into Washington, D.C. It doesn't need to take over the Capitol building. It doesn't need to do anything but survive and be seen by the world to survive. Remember how Castro took over Cuba. He didn't march into Havana until the previous government had already left. His first march into Havana, Cuba, was his victory march. Don't fight the war the federal government has prepared to fight against you. That's the worst mistake you can make.
Gaddafi took over his government.
Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Dan. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. The corporate media is waxing ecstatic that an NFL player is going to come out soon. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Well, good for him. Does it affect your life that an NFL player is going to come out and say he's gay? Of course not. This is the fluff. Because the corporate TV news does not want to talk about Cyprus. They don't want to talk about Spain. They don't want to talk about Italy. They want to keep you amused and distracted, so you'll stay home in front of your TV set watching Real Housewives of Poughkeepsie. And you won't go down to your bank and take the savings out of your bank until the Federal Reserve has decided what they're going to do with it. Now then. We were talking earlier about everybody grabbing for more money, and I think I started to get into this before. Apparently down in Australia, one of the retail stores down there is instituting a policy that if you walk into the store and just look around, but you don't buy anything, you will be charged a $5 just looking fee on your way out. Talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face. That means people who aren't really going to be buying anything aren't going to go in there, which means that whole impulse buy mechanism just got completely derailed. Because the stores will set things up where you're going in to buy X, and all around they have all the little things that are designed to entice you. Oh, I want one of those, I want one of those. Well, people just coming in to look around aren't going to come in to look around any longer. I understand what they're thinking. My wife and I go down to this little shopping mall we have at the bottom of the hill, and the parking lots are jammed. People are in there walking around. It's a social happening place. Very few shopping bags. I think people go to shopping malls and walk around to reassure themselves that life is still normal, even if they themselves aren't really in a position to buy the latest toy, the latest fashion, or whatever. And maybe this store in Australia figured, well, we'll put an end to that. $5 looking fee here. What it all comes down to is that giant sucking sound that you're hearing in your bank account, in your wallet, in your real assets. That's the money junkies. They're sucking the life, the wealth out of the nation, because that's what money junkies do. They're addicts. They're hopelessly addicted. And just like any other addict, they don't care what harm they cause to their families, their community, their society. They just have to feed their addiction. These are seriously ill people. And that's why I keep saying it makes about as much sense to have private bankers in charge of your nation's economy as it does to have drug addicts in charge of the pharmacies. After a while, all you're getting is placebos. That's what the Federal Reserve Note is. It's a placebo currency. Faith-based money. It's only worth something because you've been taught to believe it's worth something. And it isn't. It's just ink and paper. And your acceptance of a debt obligation coming with it. Lou Rockwell is out there saying exactly the same thing. Your money is safer at home under the mattress than in a bank. And if you're worried about somebody breaking in and stealing the money in your home, don't tell anybody. Just bring it home, hide it, don't tell anybody. I think anybody who empties their savings account and brings it home and then tells their neighbor, ooh, I just emptied my savings account and I've put it in the cookie jar. That's a problem. That's a problem here. All righty, let's see. We got more callers on the line. Bob in Michigan. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael.
Aloha.
Just sitting here thinking about all this input on what to do and this and that. What about, has anybody ever mentioned about it, the country, just the general population just plain going on strike?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a big part of what Gandhi did. He called them
just don't go to work.
Days of prayer and fasting, but it was actually a general strike, and it absolutely shut India down.
Yeah. I think that would be the most effective thing, because they wouldn't get any income tax from the payroll deductions. Obviously, you'd need to get some money and some food beforehand, so you could continue at some level, and police and fire would probably have to still report for work. But, you know, generally speaking, I think that would probably be the most effective method. It would be just to plan on somebody pick a date, April 15th or whatever, and just quit. Just don't do anything.
Well, I'm sure Karen Tostado is going to be delighted to have heard you say that, because, of course, she's behind, every 15th is take a day off, and she's working toward a day when there will be a national strike that the vast majority of the population will take part in to shut it down, because that is a very effective tool. And again, they can't throw you in jail because you didn't show up to work today, or you didn't go to the supermarket, or you didn't go down and fill out whatever gratuitous paperwork the local government has demanded you fill out.
Yeah, I mean, even if a third of the population didn't show up.
Yeah, that would be a significant impact. It really would.
Oh, absolutely.
I think we're getting close to the point where the American people are going to be willing to say, yeah, I'm not going to get involved today. I'm going to stay home, be with my family, and just not get sucked into this whole grid thing again.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing about our situation right now is that your program is heard while a lot of people are at work, and a lot of these ideas don't get heard, and that's unfortunate. But that's the way it is. I mean, you have such a terrific show, and I really appreciate all the information you put forth.
Well, thank you very much. And a lot of people, we are rebroadcast here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. They repeat my show later in the evening. There are the podcasts, and a lot of people are coming in to get the podcasts because I host those off my server now, and I'm looking at the server numbers. And we got a huge audience out there.
I talked to a fellow in Wisconsin here a couple days ago, and I dumped the whole RBN list on him, and he sounded really interested and said he had some friends that were interested. And unfortunately, in the area that I'm in, these people are just as dumb as a bag of rocks.
They're not dumb, they're in denial. They're still trying to reassure themselves that what's going on in Europe can't possibly come here. I'm seeing this in people that I talk to, and all I do is I say to them, look, understand two things. One, TV news is owned by the financial centers, by the big advertisers. They're not going to tell you anything these corporate interests don't want you to know. Go out on the Internet, do your own research, make yourself fully informed, and make good choices. You know, when you tell them that, they stop thinking you're trying to put one over on them. And you're just saying, I'm just pointing you in the direction. You are free to go and look for yourself or not, and you will live with those consequences.
Yeah, I've hammered them enough. Well, I don't hammer them, but I bring it up at whatever opportunity I can, and I've gotten the nickname up here as Doomsday Bob now.
Well, they say far worse things about me.
It's kind of a proud label I wear.
Yeah, I would say so. Just say no. I'm part of the audience of the independent media. There are now two medias in this country. There's the corporate media everybody is taught they're supposed to look at and bow in obeisance to, and there's the independent media. And the independent media is growing. It now commands the larger audience away from the corporate media, which is why we had that earlier caller where they're sending out surveys. Please help us shape Fox News to be more attractive to you. And my one-line answer to that would be, tell the truth. We'll come back to Fox News and CNN if you're telling us what's really going on in the world. But as long as you're out there trying to pretend that an NFL player coming out of the closet is news that affects my life, yeah, of course we're going to tune you out. I only watch them to find out what, I look at what they're reporting on, and then I figure, okay, they're not talking about this, that's what I need to go look at.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I just got a notification in the mail and a phone call from Nielsen.
Mm-hmm.
And they want me to write down everything I listen to or watch on television.
Well, you be sure and write. Yeah, you be sure and write down what really happened. What really happened? Radio show on Republic Broadcasting.
Oh, you and John and all the rest of them.
You got it.
So, okay, Michael, keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Yeah, if you get one of these surveys or a phone call and they say, "What's your favorite program?" just say, "Republic Broadcasting. What really happened?" John Stadmiller. All of them, all of the independent media, just start putting that in there. Boy, will that make them drop a pencil on the other side of that letter. Going to go to Mike in Chicago. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, man, this is, we got a short week here before Good Friday. Oil is pushing at $96, and that's in consumer confidence came out, it dropped. Markets at all-time high, dollars high, euro has been under pressure. Euro reminds me of the gold. It's steadily going down. I've been waiting for gold. I'm not going to wait too long, to buy it. Everybody wants to get it, anything cheaper, but it's not going to get, like it was in the 80s.
No, it isn't.
That being said, I would suggest for people to use that $100,000 that the insurable amount that banks, the feds, usually insure as a benchmark for. Don't put any more than that into any type of an institution. I would if I was middle class person, I would start acquiring physical gold and hiding it.
Absolutely.
So I mean, that's a good, that's the type of diversification we need is purchasing power to maintain that, because I believe this government, I think these gas prices, that it's a complex thing, but I think that's going to really strike people soon, at the pump. Even though cars are getting a little bit better gas mileage, I think once these prices start to hit people, it's gonna be a 1-2 punch on them, and it's really gonna start waking people up. But you know what, and Bernanke's behind it. I mean, he's just this open-ended, monetary purchasing. It's never gonna end. And if it did, interest rates would have to rise. And if that happened, the whole world would collapse, like 2008. Don't you agree?
Yeah, well, Bernanke is not the mastermind behind all of this. Bernanke is basically a hired clerk for the private central banks, which, again, it's a pyramid scheme. And the only way to keep a pyramid going is you have to just keep, creating a new bottom layer and a new bottom layer. And you're right, this runaway printing to keep the system propped up is destroying the value of the dollar. I think the reason there is so much bias toward the 1% in our current economy is they're using the 1% money junkies as a cash sink, so that all of this new influx of money, they're trying to mitigate the inflationary pressures on prices by allowing the rich to simply grab the money as quickly as it's being created. Certainly the government does not want end-user gasoline prices to go up, because that's going to have a significant impact on the food supply chain, industry, commerce. If gas prices were to go through the roof, that would basically be the final death blow for a lot of America's mid-sized businesses.
Yeah, Michael, do you think there's a chart that I could pull up and that changes regularly with the price of crude oil being like I said at 96.5 right now? Notwithstanding taxes, the price at the pump as in relationship to the price of the barrel. Do you think there's some type of a chart like that I could find?
I'm sure. I'm sure there's one within the oil companies. Whether one like that, an accurate chart like that, is available to the public is another matter. It's certainly not something the oil companies would want the public to see, because it would be immediately obvious when the oil companies are gratuitously raising gas prices to maximize their profitability. Like as you go into the summer tourism season, gas prices always go up because they know people are going to be driving, they're going to be flying on airplanes, they're going to be taking cruise ships, so they'll ramp up the prices on these fuel oils to get a little bit of an extra profit. Because the demand is up, even if the cost of supply is not up.
Right, Michael. Once again, and I'll let you go. What about this massive global bubble that we're in, the 200-year bubble in bonds, this all-time high stock market, this dollar that surprisingly is it's very bullish right now. Everything is bullish, everything is bubbling, notwithstanding the euro. What's going to give here? How things can't go up, Mike, in a straight line. You know that. Well, I believe, right?
There are so many overlapping bubbles right now. We don't know which one is going to burst, but it looks like when the next big one bursts, it's probably going to burst everything else around them. We know there's a huge treasury bond bubble that has been created to support this quantitative easing. We also know that there's a huge amount of fraud in the financial system as a whole. They're rigging the LIBOR, they're rigging the gold prices, they're rigging the unemployment numbers. There is virtually no truth and accuracy and factual information coming out of the banking cartel and their servile governments. So it's kind of hard to know. But we recognize the signs of a bubbling up of the stock market. The reality is, if you take these sky-high stock prices and you adjust them for inflation, the real worth of the American stock market has been in a steady decline since the year 2000.
Absolutely. That's adjusted for real inflation. Absolutely, I agree. Yep. So I guess you're saying let's wait and see. It's like we're sitting here in a movie theater that it's actually a nightmare.
Yes.
we're waiting to see the outcome. What's going to pop? What's going to give?
I think it's pretty obvious what is going to give. The global financial system, at least the Western private central banking financial system, is going to implode. I mean, when they're down to literally stealing money from the citizens of a country to keep the system going, that's like the last act of a desperate, money junkie. And it's going to come crashing down. We all need to be ready to weather the period of uncertainty. State governments should be preparing right now to issue their own state-issued currency. No more private bankers issuing the public currency. And just get ready to start a whole new society and a whole new government. And rule number 1, no private central banks. Rule number 2, no private central banks. Rule number 3, no private central banks.
Private central banks. Very good, very good. Absolutely. Thank you, Michael, for your, for everything you're doing on this radio station and for us, okay?
All right, you got it. Thank you very much. Going to switch over to Marilyn in Michigan. Aloha, Marilyn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael.
Howdy.
I would like to comment on the guy that wanted to know the price of a barrel of oil. I find it daily on, can we say a website on here?
Sure.
On gasbuddy.com.
Gasbuddy.com. Now, does it have the price of the barrel versus the pump price? Because that's the information he wanted.
It tells the pump prices in whatever area you want. It tells the price of a barrel of oil.
Gasbuddy.com.
Whether it's going up or going down.
Okay, that's gasbuddy.com. Thanks a lot. We're going to let you and your bird go. We got to take a break for commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to hour number 3 of our show. Dan the Man is now sitting in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call into 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Let's see. Getting back to the realities of economic life. Income growth for the bottom 90% of Americans averaged just $59 over the last 4 decades. We all know the money junkies, they're doing great, billions and billions every year. You, the average American, nothing. Do you know if minimum wage had kept up with the nation's productivity and profitability, it would be $22 an hour right now. Now, speaking of corporate media propaganda, over at CNBC, they had an article simply saying the Federal Reserve, CNBC explains, and they state in this article at the CNBC website, quote, the Fed is the gatekeeper of the U.S. economy and is part of the federal government. CNBC, your pants are on fire. The Federal Reserve is not a part of the federal government. We have Alan Greenspan on video saying that the Federal Reserve is answerable to no federal government agency. They are no more federal than Federal Express. This is the beginning, I think, of a propaganda campaign to convince you that what's happening in Europe because of their private central bank won't happen here because, after all, the Federal Reserve is part of the government. That was the big lie they used back in 1913. When they set up this third Ponzi scheme private bank, they were going to call it the Third Bank of the United States. And one of the bankers looked up from his glass of scotch and said, you know, if we use that name, anybody with a knowledge of history is going to remember the First Bank of the United States and how it brought the nation to the edge of ruin, and the Second Bank of the United States and how it brought the nation to the edge of ruin. We'd better come up with another name. Well, we'll call it the Federal Reserve, and we'll bamboozle the American people into thinking it's part of the government so they won't notice while the bankers got rich and the American people got poor. Except, of course, we have noticed. And so now CNBC, which is very tied in with the financial industry, they're out here with this piece of USDA choice bovine excrement. No, I'm sorry, the USDA inspectors are now on furlough because of sequestration. And they're out there trying to resell the lie that the Federal Reserve is a part of the federal government. No, it is not. Alan Greenspan admits, and we linked one of his videos underneath this article at whatreallyhappened.com, where he's saying, no, it's a private bank. It's a privately owned central bank that is in business to profit from your work. You're trying to say, oh, it's part of, you must support the Federal Reserve because it's part of the government, and you're loyal to the government, are you not? Well, I got news flash for you. Loyalty stops when your government walks off a cliff into shark-infested waters and expects you to follow along. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. Dan's in the control room here, and I want to get on to some news that is not dealing with the economy. And starting off here, again, more confirmation coming out that the so-called chemical weapons attack in Syria was carried out by the hired mercenary army. It wasn't the government forces that were doing it. The U.S. was out there saying, oh, of course it had to be Assad. Obvious false flag. Obvious false flag here. Apparently, Tunisian terrorists are now confirmed members of the Syrian death squads being run by the rebels. In fact, there's now accusations of ethnic cleansing being carried out by this hired mercenary army. And these are the people the U.S. government is supporting. More confirmation, the U.S. is now shipping weapons directly to the Syrian hired mercenaries. Remember they were talking about al-Nusra's mystery sponsor? Well, no mystery any longer. It's Barack Obama. Over at From the Trenches World Report, apparently the United States is training new mercenaries to go into Syria. They're over in Jordan, training up over there to send them across the border. Full court press. Full court press. Meanwhile, the Syrian army has recaptured the symbolic Baba Amr district in Homs. So the hired mercenaries are falling back on that. This is now day 3 of the Assad watch. Where is he? Now, last Saturday we started getting these rumors that was launched by a supposed Arab media site, which turns out to actually be hosted in Israel, claiming that Assad had been shot and possibly killed by an Iranian bodyguard. And after that was silence. There have been denials coming from within Syria itself. And this is a complex issue to try and figure out. Because if Assad was really dead, the American corporate media, you would think, would be proclaiming it more loudly than this NFL player who's about to come out. Of course, with Assad dead, the entire public justification for an intervention in Syria evaporates. You said you wanted to get Assad out. He's gone. End of war. Bring our kids home. Stop spending all that money on these hired mercenaries. So the U.S. media might have a reason to remain silent. Syria's government would remain silent while they work out the transition, and they don't want to dispirit their own troops on that. Another reason for the silence may be that Syria actually caught the attacker, and it's not Iranian. It's something very embarrassing, CIA, Mossad. But all of this going back and forth, the reason I'm saying we're not sure what has happened is because the easiest way to dispel a phony rumor of Assad's being shot is for Assad to make a live television appearance. And so far, that has not happened. And I'm remembering back to that whole situation with Francisco Franco, where there were reports that he died, and Spain officially denied it for something like a month. They were even making fun of it over at Saturday Night Live with their weekend report, and Chevy Chasing out there saying, Generalissimo Francisco Franco is still dead. I'd be a lot happier. I think Syria's military forces would be a lot happier if Assad would just get on TV and say, yeah, I'm here, I'm fine, no problem. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. Now, when we come back from this commercial break, I have now been officially banned from commenting over at the Daily Mail in Great Britain. And apparently a lot of other people have over this story we're going to be talking about when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So earlier today, the Daily Mail over in Great Britain ran this huge article about the discovery of color photographs from a Nazi death camp. Ooh, horror, horror, horrors. And I posted a comment to the effect that, here we go again, because anytime Israel's about to start a war, the media starts waving Nazis at us. The comment was expunged, and I received the following email. Hello, your account has been permanently deactivated for going against community guidelines. You are no longer allowed to post on the Daily Mail or other associated newspaper limited sites using this or any other user. Please be advised that should you post again, we reserve the right to contact your ISP employer and seek that action is taken against you. Regards, the senior community editor of the Daily Mail. Now, I'm my own employer and my own ISP. So, Daily Mail threat. Actually, it's amusing. It's almost a badge of honor to get banned from commenting for these corporate websites. I've been banned over at Reuters for quite some time. Now the Daily Mail, they don't want to hear me say anything. And I actually put out the comment on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. If you look at all the comments that have been published under this article, they are all universally, oh, how terrible the Jews suffered, we must never forget, and we must always support Israel, so that pure propaganda. And I asked if anybody else attempted to post a negative comment and had it expunged or were they blocked, to let me know, and apparently more than a few have. So there's another lesson to learn about the corporate media. When you're over at their websites and you're reading the comments, it is not a cross-section of public opinion. It is a cherry-picked assortment of whatever comments support the agenda, which in this case is, we all have to feel sorry for Israel and so forth. And again, history has shown, every time the corporate media starts waving Nazis at us, it means Israel's going to start something very ugly. Two more stories. I know we got callers on the line. I'm going to get to them really soon. Washington Post is going to introduce a paywall, so you will have to pay a fee per month to access their website. Same thing with the Daily Telegraph. They're considering a £2 a month paywall. You know what the corporate media just did? They just handed a large chunk of their readership over to the independent media on a silver platter. That's what they just did. Going to go to the phones here. Keith in Montana. Aloha, Keith. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I had two things for you. I can't remember the guy's first name, but his last name, or his what he called surname, I guess you call it, was al-Assad. It wasn't Bashar al-Assad that was shot. It was someone else.
Well, there was one of his supporters, but the rumor that was out there Saturday was the president of Syria had been shot and killed.
Yeah, I know, but there was a video on YouTube that had the whole run-up of the guy, and like I've got so many friends on YouTube that are over in Syria, or that are posting videos from Syria, but it was a whole thing there. And but anyway, it was just a hype thing like that. You know, I could imagine it was one of those things to make the Obama terrorists feel good that they were making progress, because the day before, Bashar al-Assad was seen driving up in his own car to a meeting where he freely was walking around Damascus and everything like that. And it's like, for anyone viewing that, it was like, boy, this is shocking. I mean, you're supposed to be Syria in lockdown like that, and here's Assad driving in his own car. It looked like a Caprice or something like that, right up to the meeting where there's like 300 or 400 people in there like that. He has no bodyguards with him or anything like that.
You know, it's funny you would mention that, because just before the final invasion of Iraq, we saw a similar video of Saddam Hussein arriving for a meeting, and he just gets out of the car and the crowd's around him, and some of them are carrying guns, because under Saddam Hussein, Iraqi people could own fully automatic machine guns, and he wasn't worried about it. And he's out there in the open, and there's no bodyguards, there's no Lexan, and he's just shaking hands and pressing the flesh. And we're being told that Saddam was an evil dictator who was cruel and oppressing his people, and that was one of the rationalizations to go in there.
Well, look at Gaddafi. He was driving around, standing up in that car there, driving all over Libya there too. You know, waving at all his constituents, everything like that. You know.
Oh, the Libyan people loved him. I mean, he had greened up Libya. He had improved their economy with his state central bank and the gold dinar. He built this huge waterworks that was just, the standard of living in Libya was on its way out.
Yeah.
The ones who hated Gaddafi and Saddam and Assad are these money junkie private central bankers who dare not let any nation exist that has a state bank and a state-issued currency in order to keep their little fraud perpetrated. And that's exactly what happened there.
All right, and I was going to tell you, I haven't gotten one of those things. I mean, I can't comment on any of those networks. None of the main networks will let me comment. It just says that my IP address is blocked. Yeah,
well, I imagine they're probably going to be doing that a lot more now, because they're clearly filtering the comments to try and reassure those few readers they still have that, yes, this is what you must think, but the harder they push, the more obvious it becomes. I got a couple of emails saying all I did was comment on how the Red Cross records don't support this story, immediate banning and the rest of it. And when many years ago, back in the 1980s, when I was working on a film project in Munich, I made a point of traveling out there to the Dachau Museum. And the tour guide there said this was a labor camp It wasn't a death camp. The inmates were well cared for, they were fed well, and they were given good medical care, because obviously if you're going to have them working at a job, they've got to be healthy to do that. And same thing if you go over to Auschwitz. The tour guides there will openly tell you that big crematorium that Israel waves around as, the horrible thing the Nazis did, that crematorium was built by the Russians after the war was over to deal with the typhus outbreak. And this whole illusion that has been crafted for us to live in is all crumbling down.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen that HolocaustDenial.com there.
No, I haven't, but obviously I need to take a look.
Well, there's a whole bunch of videos in there. One of them that I thought was particularly interesting is because here in Montana, when we drilled our well, we hit water at 11 feet, and we sunk the well on down to 42 feet for the heck of it, and I can still pump 45 gallons a minute. But they said that, and I think it was Camp Sobibor over there, that they were trying to dig out, and they couldn't dig down because they had to get underneath this alleged minefield that was 5 feet down, but the groundwater was so bad. But the guy that breaks this video down there says there is no way you could have 750,000 bodies buried in ground that has a well 60 feet from their building, but only 30 feet from these mass graves. Yeah. Because the disease and stuff would just be outrageous,
Well, they've taken ground-penetrating radar into Treblinka, where there are supposed to be these mass graves underground, and the ground-penetrating radar shows the strata is undisturbed. It's exactly the way it's been since it was laid down during the last ice age. They know the soap story was a complete hoax. Science caught up with them on that one. The soap it's a low-fat wartime soap. It has no human DNA in it, interestingly enough. For all those Jewish cemeteries that buried bars of soap as Holocaust victims, it's actually pig DNA in there. This was made out of pig fat. And the lampshade story has been discredited. They're made out of goat skin. And it's just on and on and on. And it's one of the biggest lies that we are raised to believe in our schools. And I believed it. When I was a kid, I was taught all this stuff, and I believed it. But when you look at the sheer ferocity that is directed at anybody who questions. I don't even like the name Holocaust denial. We're not denying bad things happened. We want to ask questions and get the specifics about it. But when you look at the sheer force of law and courts and dictatorship that is thrown at this one issue, I mean, people who claim to have seen Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, they don't get thrown in prison. People who claim to have been given a ride on an alien UFO don't have their careers destroyed. It is the sheer ferocity directed at anybody who questions this orthodox account of World War II that makes it obvious something is being hidden. Look how hard they fight to protect it. And I have this little saying that we have here. Truth needs no laws to defend it. Truth survives re-examination. Truth welcomes questions. Throughout history, only lies and liars resort to the courts and legal force to enforce dogma.
Right. And then in one of those, by the way, on that Holocaust now, the third and second to the last videos, there's a URL problem there. They've got an italics after the HTML, and you need to remove the italics after that. But anyway, the other thing on that is the guy that put the videos together showed that in panning from San Francisco, he panned around the entire Market Street and everything like that, which just 1/3 of his view there. And he says that they want to allege that this entire population was buried in 3 little bitty graves like that, that were about the size of Olympic swimming pools, But they couldn't have happened that way. But it's not to say that Jews or Jehovah's Witnesses or homosexuals or gypsies and stuff didn't die, or communists like that, But there's that, I can't say the word here, but it's 6 million my butt.
Yes, that's good enough. We can say that on the air.
Yeah. But anyway, on YouTube TV there's a video there that shows from 1915 forward, clip to 1938, that 6 million number was being used by the New York Times or anything like that.
Yeah, we reported that a couple of weeks ago. That 6 million number is not based on any facts or reality. It is a religious reference to a prophecy in the Talmud that 6 million Jews must perish and then they will regain Israel. And they were using that number in World War I. In fact, they were even using it before World War I. It was always 6 million Jews at risk, 6 million Jews are starving, 6 million. It is a religious icon. It is not based in fact, and they've reused it and reused it, and if you don't believe them and believe as you're told to believe, you will go to jail. Got to take a break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And, of course, to recap on what I was reporting on earlier, the Daily Mail in Great Britain has permanently banned me from commenting in any of their newspapers because I suggested that any time they start waving Holocaust and Nazis at us, it means Israel's going to start a war. And apparently the Daily Mail thinks I'm completely off my nut to think that. So, of course, over here at Antiwar.com, apparently the United Nations is reporting a major increase in Israeli warplanes over South Lebanon. These are all violations of Lebanese sovereign airspace. And over at StratRisks, they're reporting that Israel is mulling a new buffer zone on the border with Syria. That means they're going to grab off another big chunk of Syria and say, this is our safety zone. Then they move in there and say, oh, we need a new safety zone, and they grab another chunk. They used to have a safety zone. It was called the Golan Heights. But the Daily Mail thinks I'm absolutely nonsense for linking this surge of Nazi Holocaust on the corporate media with increased aggressions by Israel, although, obviously, there does seem to be a link. Going to go back to the phones. Peggy in Canada. Aloha, Peggy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I love your show.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you were aware that the BRICS are meeting today and tomorrow.
Yes, I was. We talked about it in the first hour of the show.
Oh, I missed the first hour today.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. But on their agenda, they said they're thinking of opening their own World Bank.
That's exactly right. Their own bank under government control, and they're talking about their own common currency, which will rival the dollar and the euro on the world market. And I'm sure the money junkies are already out there saying, declare war on them. I don't care what kind of an excuse. Set off a nuclear bomb someplace. We've got to destroy them. We can't have a nation with a state bank and a value-based currency. That was the reason.
I'm looking at a spreadsheet of the major foreign holders of the Treasury securities with a total of $5,616 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And the BRIC nations, Brazil owns $253 billion, Russia owns $162 billion, India owns $58 billion, and China $1,264 billion, and South Africa $13 billion. So what would happen if they turn those all in on the same day?
Well, they could bring down the U.S. economy, but what's going to happen is the U.S. government is already trying to get war with China going. And, of course, the instant war breaks out, the U.S. government is going to say, hey, we don't owe you that money anymore. Too bad. We're at war. We're not going to pay money to nations we're at war with. And that's why they're over there in the Western Pacific, rattling their sabers about, these disputed islands. And since that doesn't seem to be getting any traction, they're trying to crank up war with North Korea. They're provoking like crazy, and then every time North Korea stands up and says, how dare you, the media says, oh, those North Koreans, they're belligerent, they're dangerous, and so forth and so on.
And our little country here of Canada, we have purchased 67 billion of them.
Well, that was your mistake.
Well, our Prime Minister was bragging about 2 months ago how he turned all his papers in. Well, actually, his wife sold his portfolio, and he didn't really know why, but, she had made the decision, so he's cash heavy right now, waiting for this.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that'll be it. Thanks. Love your show.
Thank you very much, Peggy. We're going to switch over to Clayton in Austin. Aloha, Clayton. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I guess I have a change of topic, but I just want to let you know that I was successful in getting on Michael Savage's show last night. This guy Den was hosting it, and he was going on about talking about mental health and how they need to look at people with the mental health issues as far as the gun violence, and so they need to go after. And he wouldn't talk about the SSRI drugs. And I was able to get on there and raise that point. And he got me on at the end. He said he agreed with me, but then I got cut off, so that he wouldn't go into any detail about it. At least I was able to get the information out there. He did ask me, what did I mean by SSRI drugs? And I said, like Amplify, Wellbutrin, all these drugs. And I just said, Colorado shooter on them. Columbine, he was on them. Lanza, he was on them. And, went through and brought up these commercials, you see on TV. I said, look at the side effects, hallucinations, suicide, anxiety, and then that's about as far as you let me go. But I at least was able to get that out there, and so I consider it a pretty big victory because I've been trying to get off this show.
Congratulations, and on getting that out there. And it is an issue that needs to be kept before the public eye. It is the biggest drug problem we have in this country. And, the gun grabbers are out there saying, oh, this surge in mass killings, it's all the fault of the guns. No, the guns have been around all along. But if you look at the surge in these mass killings, it matches exactly the flooding of these medications into the general public. 10% of the population are on these medications. In the most extreme case, we're seeing these strange suicides and mass violence. There are a lot of people who get into trouble with these drugs and then just voluntarily get off them. That was the case that I had on them, and it didn't make any headlines, so nobody's keeping track of that. But it is. It's a big problem. And before the gun grab agenda got going, Fox News admitted this was a problem. Michael Moore admitted this was a problem. But now it's the big hidden secret because the goal is to ban the guns. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Paul dropped just now.
Paul dropped just now. All right. Gosh darn it. Couldn't wait long enough to talk to me. All righty, getting back to more serious news here. This is coming out of Global Research again. Dangerous crossroads, the threat of a preemptive nuclear war directed against Iran. Now, in order to go into Iran, Israel and or the United States, probably Israel leading and the United States following along like a lovesick puppy, it's going to have to be directed against not only Iran's power station, like Israel did to the Iraqi power station at Osirak. They're going to have to take out the fuel rod processing facilities, the medical isotope labs, including the processing facility deep under a mountain. Because that's the official excuse for this war. Oh, Iran nuclear threat, even though Israel is a much greater nuclear threat to the world. The only way they're going to get that processing facility that's inside that mountain is they're going to have to nuke it. So this whole excuse for war with Iran is we have to go in and use nuclear weapons against them without any excuse because we're concerned somewhere down the road they might have a nuclear weapon they would want to use against us because we just attacked them. And remember, something you need to keep in mind, with all this screaming about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and Iran's weapons of mass destruction and Burundi's weapons of mass destruction and Syria's weapons of mass destruction, one and only one nation has ever actually used a nuclear weapon of mass destruction against the civilians of another country, and that nation that committed that atrocity is the United States of America. The United States is the only nation to have actually done it. And I know I'm going to get calls and emails from people saying, well, it shortened the war and saved a lot of lives. No, it didn't. Japan was trying to surrender even before the first nuclear bomb fell. And after that first nuclear bomb fell, they were really trying to surrender. And Truman refused to accept the envoys because what he wanted to do was demonstrate to the world, first of all, that the United States had these weapons and was psychotic enough to use them. So you'd better do what we tell you to do. Like, accept the dollar as the global reserve currency. Got a caller on the line, Steve in Virginia. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there. Hi. Thank you. I wanted to ask you about Obama's trip to Israel. Do you think that he was over there, or at least partly, to get instructions from the government there, or do you think
that's about all that he really did accomplish? Everything else was a photo op.
Yeah. Do you think that was a good comment he made about the Palestinians? I guess that was political, too.
That was political. He's trying to look like he's still an arbiter of peace in the region, but if you read the postscripts, what he's talking about is moving the Palestinians into a chunk of Jordan. The Palestinian state is not going to be inside Eretz Israel. They're going to carve a piece off of Jordan for the Palestinians. That's what they're actually talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Jordan, by the way, has not agreed to this little technical wrinkle in that solution.
Yeah. And I was just going to ask you, I'm happy about what Iceland has done as far as the bankers.
Oh, yeah.
you think that there may be some consequences for them from the globalists?
I'm sure there will be. The only problem is nobody can think of a reason to attack and invade Iceland that the public's going to buy. They're not terrorists. They're not Al-Qaeda. They're not people who hate America for their freedoms. I'm sure that the bankers would love to go in there and reconquer Iceland and bring them back into the global Ponzi scheme. They just can't come up with an excuse anybody's going to believe.
Yeah. We were just going to say, too, we were reminded when you were mentioning about the Daily Mail, we were reminded of back in the Olympics, some people noticed during, I think, one part of the ceremony, the phoenix in the background, I think on one of the flags flying or something. So, we're not surprised about things that come out of England, or I guess the city of London at any rate.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we know the corporate media is co-opted and subverted by overlapping interests. Obviously, they're advertisers. That's why they don't want to talk about SSRIs. They want to lose those very expensive pharmaceutical ads. They're certainly going to do whatever their corporate owners tell them to do. The corporate owners are going to do whatever the bankers tell them to do, because the banks are holding the notes on all the money that was used to build these corporate media empires. And, of course, ultimately, they're co-opted by, they're infiltrated and subverted by numerous bodies, including the CIA through Operation Mockingbird, and, of course, Israel itself. And so, frankly, I'm not surprised that Daily Mail, separate from Daily Mail, that Daily Mail did ban me. I'm actually surprised it took this long for them to get around to doing it.
Yeah. Well, we're really happy for your efforts, and we avid listeners, and we really appreciate your work.
Well, thank you very much, and I hope you'll spread the word to your family and friends and help us build our listenership, because if the Washington Post is going to put up a paywall and the Telegraph's going to put up a paywall, they're basically, anybody who doesn't want to pay that money is going to be looking for a new media outlet, and it's our chance to basically scoop up an even larger share of that audience out there. And we've already, according to Rasmussen, we've already got the majority audience. More people are coming to the independent media here online than they are going to this corporate TV news outlets. I've got more readers on my website than pretty much any big city newspaper right now. So, yeah, we're definitely winning the war for the minds of America and the world. Okay? I guess Steve left. Alrighty, moving right along, more news from various war fronts. The Kurdish rebels have declared a formal ceasefire with Turkey. So that's going to free up Turkey to focus more on getting into Syria and Iran. Now, as we mentioned last week, South Korea and the United States have signed a joint military plan against North Korea. They're just out there rattling their sabers as hard as they can. And this is in response to North Korean provocations. North Korea is the bad guy here. So let's see. The United States hits North Korea with massive economic sanctions. They then carry out a major naval exercise with Japan and South Korea off the coast of North Korea, which is a repeat of what Roosevelt did to Japan to provoke them into war. North Korea is supposed to be the cause of this conflict. If you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. And again, we know what's going on. Every time this Ponzi scheme, private central bank system gets into trouble, they start a war to get out of it, or at least distract from it, to shift the blame and say, it's not our fault you're all hungry and starving, it's the war, it's the Nazis, it's the Kaiser, it's the commies, whatever. Crash of 1907 solved with World War I. Crash of 1929 solved with World War II. Crash of 2008, the United States has already invaded over 10 countries on 2 continents. It's already technically a world war. And we're going to lose this one. But the bankers don't care. They love war. They don't care which side wins or loses, because both sides go into debt to fight the war, then both sides go deeper into debt to rebuild from the war once it's over. Wars are the bankers' richest harvest. That's why Brown Brothers Harriman in New York was funding the rise of Adolf Hitler right up to the day war broke out. They don't care who wins or loses. It's all about forcing the world back into debt slavery for the next 100 years. Ever stop to think that before the creation of the Federal Reserve, there was no such thing as a world war? And now we're on the front porch of big mistake number 3. Alrighty. North Korea has put their artillery forces in top combat posture. They're out there blustering and bluffing and screaming. They're aiming their missiles at North America and Hawaii and Guam and all the rest of it. And again, I wish they'd kind of shut up because they're not helping the situation. 2, North Korea does not have a rocket able to lift a nuclear warhead anywhere near the United States. The Taepodong 2 is their largest, longest range rocket. The last time they test-fired it, it blew up. On a really good day with a tailwind, it can reach some of the westernmost Aleutian Islands. It can't reach Alaska proper. It can't reach Hawaii proper. It certainly cannot reach the continental United States. This is just, I guess, their government idea of bluffing and maybe it's for internal consumption. North Korea is making their claims to their own people. They won't dare attack us. We'll destroy their homeland. And they're lying to their people as much as our government is lying to the American people. Now then, and getting back to this issue with the Daily Mail, banning me from commenting because I pointed out that every time the corporate media starts waving Nazis at us, it's a signal Israel's going to start a war with someplace. There's an interesting article over on Aleppo News called Testing the Limits of Freedom of Speech. And basically they've got the first interview with Ernst Zundel since he was released from prison for daring to question the revealed dogma of history. And if you go back and study the events of his arrest and deportation, the governments were breaking their own laws left and right to just get this guy because he dared ask questions about historical events that have been exploited for political gain. Now, my response to this headline, Testing the Limits of Freedom of Speech. There are no limits to freedom of speech. Either freedom of speech applies to everyone on every topic, or the First Amendment is not worth the parchment it's written on. As I said before in the show, nobody locks up people claiming to have seen a Bigfoot or a Loch Ness Monster. People who claim to have been given a ride on an alien UFO don't have their careers destroyed. Only on this one topic of the events of World War II is so much wrath and coercion evident to protect the official story. Worse than what Galileo had to put up with when he dared to say that the Earth actually moved around the sun. It is the sheer ferocity of the attacks on those who are asking reasonable questions about history, about the obvious inconsistencies, the already exposed fraudulent evidence. The sheer fury to protect the official story makes it obvious something is being hidden. That's what made me suspicious. I grew up believing this whole thing, that Nazi Germany was just as bad as movies showed us, that they had death camps and they were turning Jews into lampshades and soap and the rest of it. I believed every bit of it. Until I saw how people who were asking reasonable questions were treated. And the first thought that crossed my mind is, there is something being hidden. Truth needs no law to support it. Truth is self-evident to all. Truth withstands re-examination. Truth survives questions. Throughout history, from Galileo to Zundel, only lies and liars have resorted to the courts to enforce adherence to dogma. Now, you remember this whole thing a while back with Chris Dorner, ex-cop, still won't mention whether or not this guy was on prescription antidepressants. And he went on a shooting spree and finally got burned up in a cabin up there by Lake Arrowhead, Big Bear area. Remember, Riverside put out a $1 million reward for information leading to the arrest and capture or death of Chris Dorner. And the people who encountered him and reported it to the police where he was want that reward. Well, Riverside's kind of reneged. Said it's off the table. The conditions we set have not been met. So there will be no payment of that $1 million reward. So, when the politicians offer you a $1 million reward for information leading to the arrest and capture of well, somebody like me, you can just ignore them. They won't pay it. Going to go to the phones. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? I got news yesterday that the Texas Nationalist Movement is going to have a lot of booths and a presentation at the Battle of San Jacinto Festival on April 20th of next month.
Mm-hmm.
And now Texas National Movement and some Tea Party groups are now given persona non grata not to come because they are too political. And it's a historic site. And the thing is, this, like I say, but La Raza and all the other groups are allowed there. But you can't allow the Tea Party. And I'm just thinking, when you say about free speech, free speech, I mean, it's a state taxpayer-funded historic site. All free speech should be allowed, even if I disagree with it.
Well, of course, if you're a supporter of free speech, you have to support it even when the person speaking is saying something that you absolutely do not agree with and you find incredibly offensive. Of course, under the principle of free speech, you can then stand up and say, in rebuttal, your facts are uncoordinated and your information is very unreliable, and that's how debate happens. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That's how new ideas are born. But yeah, if this state-funded facility is allowing these political groups in and excluding other political groups, then yes, they, like the corporate media, are attempting to filter the public perception in a certain way.
Well, the thing is, these Hispanic groups, they sort of like hail General Santa Anna as a god, and it's like, Mike, I got letter correspondence from people in Mexico, corresponding to people in Texas back in the 1830s, saying how much they hated Santa Anna.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't realize when the Texas Revolution started, all of Mexico was in revolt. It's just Texans were the only one that kicked Mexico out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, there was a financial banker motive behind that whole thing. The people of Mexico had been crushed into poverty, and Santa Anna was sent out there as the banker's errand boy to basically get everybody back in line and willing to pay their taxes.
And they're trying to make it a race war, saying it was the gringos against the Mexicans. No, if you go to the cemetery here where you see war heroes, you see a lot of Hispanic names that fought in the Texas War of Independence. So they're trying to make it a race war.
No, it wasn't race. It's like every other war. It's the bankers against everybody else. And, of course, the victors rewrite the history, and I'm sure the bankers would have everybody think it was a race war, just like they'd like to pretend that the Rothschilds' threat against the Congress over the canceling of the charter for the First Bank of the United States in 1811 had absolutely nothing to do with the War of 1812.
Well, right now we got an opportunity to shut the bankers down. That's by not starting a war.
Well, we're not going to shut them down. They're shutting themselves down. What they're trying to do is they're going to come out and loot everybody to try and keep their Ponzi scheme going. And, again, you've got to take care of your own wealth and assets, and the more you keep your own money under control, the less the bankers can grab it to keep their little Ponzi scheme going. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, George. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I want to talk about an example of just how completely over the top and nutty this whole anti-terror thing has been. Yesterday in California, a judge sentenced a teenager, Adam Gardenhire, to 30 months in prison after he pled guilty to deliberately directing a laser pointer at a private airplane. Now, let me tell you why this is completely bogus. The traditional gas tube or rod laser, because of the way it operates, can project a beam that does not diverge. The spot on the moon principle. But laser pointers that you are buying from eBay don't have rods and tubes. They have a laser diode. And if you take the little focusing lens off the front, the light is not coming out as a beam of any kind. It fans out quickly. The little lens refocuses it. So what you're getting is a projector of the aperture on the diode way on down to wherever that laser beam is being focused. And because these lenses are not of high quality, the beams do fan out. Now, for those of you on Justin TV, this laser pointer is one I acquired for a physics experiment relating to my research into the Big Bang. And over the length of a football field at a playground, which is what I was putting my test setup in, despite opening this up and tinkering with the focusing lens, at the length of one football field, the beam was still 2 feet across. It wasn't a tiny pinpoint beam that's dangerous to eyes. These laser pointers are not, in fact, operating the way traditional gas and rod lasers do. By the time this beam gets up to an airplane in the sky, I doubt it would even be visible. So this idea that laser pointers are dangerous and so forth, no, they're not, yeah, at close range, yes, they are. But the idea that you are going to bring down an airplane by shining a laser pointer at it is a complete fiction. The physics don't support it. These are not true lasers in the classical sense. It's a diode that puts out a monochromatic light and a lens that focuses it into a beam, but that beam spreads rapidly. And this teen got 30 months in federal prison. All righty. There's been another earthquake over in the Canary Islands, and it's only 4.1. It hit El Hierro Island, but the reason we're concerned about that, of course, is the next island to the north is La Palma. And on La Palma is a volcano called the Cumbre Vieja. The whole eastern slope of that volcano is slipping. There are fractures and fissures all over. A large quake under that island could, geologists agree, send the entire eastern half of that mountain into the ocean. That would create a mega tsunami that would completely wipe out the entire eastern seaboard. But the government is going to take your money to make sure there's not too much carbon dioxide to fight that evil global warming that is still sending snow all over Europe and North America. I hear the music. It is time for me to get out of here and accomplish something useful this afternoon. So until tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network, stay safe, stay well. Keep yourself fully informed so that you can make good choices. Share what you know with who you know. Get everybody speaking out about what's going on in Cyprus, Spain, and Italy, and Europe. It is going to come here. Support Republic Broadcasting. Don't forget the Republic Trading Group for your silver and gold. And aloha, America.